Welcome back to the first Season 5 battle report from Broken Banners. Quick channel message, really sorry that we kind of flubbed out at the end of Season 4. There was a lot of real life going on, and we just decided at that point that we would ride out the rest of Season 4, wait for Season 5, and come back out kicking and screaming. And here we are with me doing most of the kicking and screaming in this match of Targaryens versus Baratheons. I chose one of the commanders that got changed, the only one on Renly's side that got changed, Renly Lord Paramount of the Stormlands, against Suitor playing Mother of Dragons, Targaryen's biggest change by far. Admittedly, Season 5 really didn't change too much, and a lot of the changes that were made weren't terribly impactful. Some of the big takeaways are that Lance Cavalry are still good, just not quite as good. And a lot of the commanders before that weren't very good are still pretty bad. Except for the High Sparrow. I think High Sparrow's doing pretty well, and you might see a video out with him in the near future, but that's enough of that. We might do a little episode covering the Season 5 changes later on, but like I said, there's really not too many of them. You could probably get through all of them in about 2, maybe 3 minutes, and I don't think it's really going to change any lists for anyone, except for maybe a couple Greyjoys that are going to start running Iron Makers, or maybe a few other small changes. Without further ado, we're going to get on into the lists. I am playing Renly Lord Paramount, or Garland Tyrell as some people like to call him, in Halberds. This is a combo that I know a lot of people really enjoyed before the changes, and now Renly 2 has a couple really minor changes. Boisterous Charisma kind of sucks now. Whenever you pass a panic test, not a morale test, a panic test, you get to put out either a panic token or a weaken token onto somebody in long range. Whoopee. And for his cards, his really bad card, Inexplicable Return, now allows you to discard it at the start of a friendly turn and draw an actual card. This is a card that we've been really hoping would get this change for quite some time, but I mean, all it really did was make this unplayable garbage card into a cyclable garbage card. It's still not so great. Likewise, Hidden Affairs is still not that great of a card, but I mean, that one you've always been able to cycle. But the idea is that putting Stalwart in the Halberds sets them to a 3-4 unit, making them really formidable central bastion that your enemy is not going to want to attack, and hopefully he's going to be able to get a Hidden Affairs charge after getting into position within his brother's shadow, which is a great card. Next, I'm trying Courtney Attachment in Rose Knights. Last season, Courtney lost bookkeeping and gained Might of the Crown, which is allowing him to charge off of the crowns. And with Tack Repo, he can kind of actually move his Rose Knights where they want to go. It's a combo I've been wanting to try for a long time, so I'm getting a chance to do it here. Though, admittedly, I thought I was playing against a Belwas Unsullied list when I showed up tonight with my list. So, going against Double Dragons, we'll see how it goes. Next is Riders of Highgarden, which is an excellent pick into Dragons, and always has been. They got an unexpected buff to go with the Lance nerfs. For those that haven't been paying attention, Lance are no longer throwing a base 6-4 across all the units that have Lance. Now they're throwing 5-4. So when they're actually engaged and they don't get their charge bonus, they're throwing Jack Diddley. Like, we're talking like poor fellow levels numbers of dice. Riders of Highgarden have always been the only Lance that hit on 4. However, with the Lance changes, Riders of Highgarden in particular got a change where they get +1 to hit when they're charging. So now they get to hit on 3 up with the rest of the big boy Lances on their charge. This was a huge change I was not expecting, and I had basically just put these guys on the shelves once Crownland Scouts came out, so I am super excited about this. Finally, Golden Company crossbows. Renly still doesn't have a ranged unit, and I've got a feeling we're probably never going to see any. So these are the guys that we're going with. For NCUs, I'm running Shay, Marjorie, and Shira, and the theme with all of these is that they get to heal one whenever they claim a zone, which has a lot of synergy with Rose Knights. The idea is I get the Rose Knights stuck on in there with somebody, and over the course of a few activations, I whittle them away with all of this healing. I don't even have to make any attacks. I'm just healing and dealing. This strategy doesn't really work too well against dragons, but, you know, in my defense, I had no idea I was going against dragons. I should have expected that. Speaking of dragons, here we go. It's Mother of Dragons. We've got Daenerys and Jorah. Jorah last season went from being a 1-point attachment with Dany to a 0-point, so now they always go together. But Mother of Dragons wasn't really seeing much play. It was still an era of Drogo, really just kind of dominating Targaryens. But Mother of Dragons got a few pretty notable card buffs, and I'm putting those up on the screen right there. And then Daenerys herself has also gained Threaten to go on with her card. So she's gotten a few noticeable increases right there. Adam's gone ahead and put her in Stormcrow Archers, which are just a really solid ranged unit because, again, last patch, they got a pretty nice update to getting loyalty through coins. So if you control the bags, they are saving 4/6. But what's really important is just that when you've got the zones they want, they're actually an incredibly efficient long-range 6-point unit. Unsullied Swordmasters are also making an appearance, and they got a minor buff. In the same vein of Kingsmen, if your opponent does not control the zone you want to control, you get a buff, which is basically Dauntless. I have always been of the opinion that Unsullied units have been fine. Unsullied have just been kind of pushed out because when you've got 7 points, why not just either save a point and go for Screamers, which are an incredibly efficient 6-point cavalry, and until the Riders buff, I would probably say the best cavalry in the game next to Tully Cavaliers. But they also had to compete with a dragon for that spot. So giving them a little extra something makes them a little bit more appealing and gives Targaryens some strong elite infantry options. I don't know if it's really enough to be noticeable, but we'll see how the game plays out. Then we've got the two good dragons, Drogon and Rhaegal. Anyone who has never seen a dragon before, I'll just let you look at that card, and I hate dragons. I really, really do. Almost as much as Greyjoys. But they're really good, and especially with the Mother of Dragons buff, they're going to be an absolute nightmare on the battlefield as if they weren't already. For NCUs, Adam is running Tycho, Miri, and his one of the warlocks. I can't say their names. I think they're designed to not be pronounceable. Tycho is bringing a lot of really significant spot healing to a list that definitely wants it because the dragons are packing a hell of a punch. And with Fire Made Flesh, they do have a trick up their sleeve to give themselves some extra resilience there, pun intended, when they need to, but you can't always rely on that. And with an 8-wound unit, especially since I've got Lance Cavalry on the field, Tycho is really important because if these dragons ever drop down to about 6 wounds, between Final Strike and Riders of Highgarden, they very well might just die. So they really need to be able to be healed right then and there. Miri provides a lot of healing over the course of the game, but it's really not too much on any given round. It's just 1 wound, same as Marjorie. But being able to toss out weakened tokens like nothing, replacing zones, is really nice. So that's what we're looking at there. A lot of token control, especially with his Daz over there being able to toss out extra tokens when he takes the letters. Against me, dragons punching through all of me heavy armor. I'm admittedly not feeling so great about this game walking through the door, but we'll see how it goes. We're going to be playing on Game of Thrones. It's the quintessential game mode, and I feel there's no better way to welcome in a new season like Game of Thrones. So we start off with terrain after having set up our 5 objectives for Game of Thrones, and Adam's going to go ahead and toss a corpse pile in the center of 3 objectives, which makes sense for dragons. They really want to make sure that you're bombing your panic test to really push through all their damage. I put down a palisade to try and provide myself some cover and maybe disrupt some of his infantry. Adam places down another corpse pile, so I place down a weirwood to try and cancel that out by locating that over there. I think I used that word right. It might not even be a word. We roll for sides. I get to choose them. So we are going to flip them around, and I'm going to take the side with the weirwood tree after we rolled about 4 times and got the same number for both of us, which is always a fun little coincidence. My phone pin's actually one of those circumstances. We lay out the objective cards, and most of them aren't terribly impactful, but I didn't really expect that to be the case anyway with dragons who are planning on just tabling me, or at the very least killing everyone except for one of my slow-moving infantry units, and then parking themselves on a point. Unsullied swords are pointed down the center, and I put Renly and halberds on the far side away from the wall, hoping that, I don't even know what, dragons are really scary, and there's nothing good for me over there. Thankfully, Dragon goes on the opposite end, away from my 3-4 unit that wants to be passing the morale test. and he's going to line them up against the wall, which makes sense considering he can maneuver and march on over them. He can't charge over them, which is very significant, so I'm going to put my crossbows there, and I'm going to try and position them behind that wall later down the line to prevent dragon charges. Other dragon goes right there, and I'm going to go ahead and put my rose knights down opposite the unsullied swords and straight down the center. Stormcrow archers are going to go next to the unsullied, and I'm going to put riders opposite them to try and keep an eye on those dragons. Off the bat, I'm really not feeling too good about my deployment. I've kind of trapped my Golden Company crossbows off in no man's land, and the best thing I can do is put my riders next to them to try and put some pressure on the dragons. I'm going to go ahead and put Shay onto the letters, getting an extra vulnerable token and making Rhaegal vulnerable. Start of Adam's turn, I'm going to tackle reposition my Rose Knights up, and he's going to go ahead and Tycho horses his Stormcrow archers further down the center. I'm going to use Shira on crowns to zap them. It does nothing. He passes with his Dar. My turn. I pitch my Inexplicable Return and march up my crossbows. Adam's then going to maneuver his Unsullied towards my halberds, and then I'm going to pitch my other Inexplicable Return and march up my halberds. On Adam's turn, I'm going to put Oath of Duty onto my Rose Knights, and then he's going to go ahead and maneuver up his Stormcrow archers with swords still open to put a lot of threat out onto that center board. And my crossbows are kind of out in the middle of nowhere. I can't really compete with that pressure. So I just have to activate Marjorie on swords, do nothing. Adam activates Miri onto bags, remove the vulnerable token off his dragon, and then I'm going to march up my Rose Knights. Adam is then going to maneuver and march Drogon up towards the rest of his field and leave my crossbows out in the middle of nowhere. Around here, I'm starting to realize I kind of mispositioned them, and they're already out of sentinel range because even though long range is a lot, it's not enough to quite reach the Rose Knights, so I'm going to have to do some positioning around to try and get back towards that. I'm hoping with tactical reposition to move around my Rose Knights, though, it shouldn't be too big of an issue. I've got some room to work with. So with that, I'm going to activate my Riders of Highgarden, and I'm just going to try and put them into a position to really threaten the dragons. I'm a little nervous about a really aggressive dragon play, double tapping my Rose Knights. Adam's going to march and maneuver his other dragon off towards the rest and keep them very safe behind those two infantry units. 2 starts, and Suitor's going to activate his Warlock and put him onto letters. He's going to use his ability, so instead of drawing 2 cards, he's just going to draw 1, and he's going to put a second token out onto the Rose Knights, a vulnerable token. So the Stormcrow archers actually have a pretty significant damage capability. On my turn, Adam's going to go ahead and play Blood of the Dragon onto his Unsullied, which is his quest card, and I'm just going to put Shira onto swords to do nothing. Adam's going to put Tycho on horses again and move up his Unsullied a little bit closer towards my halberds. I'm going to activate Marjorie and pass. Adam's going to use Dany's once per game to fish out a card, and then he's going to use Miri onto crowns to throw out some more tokens out onto the riders. My turn, I'm going to maneuver my crossbows to try and get them into a good position, and Adam's going to use Dany's activation to shoot my crossbows in the face, but I get to play in his brother's shadow, which is going to allow Renly to make a maneuver and start moving him back towards the board. There's a little bit of maneuverability here in Renly 2, which I do actually really appreciate, which helped because I really spread out my infantry, so being able to get the halberds back into the fight and threatening those Unsullied is really useful. If Unsullied go in on the Rose Knights, just the threat of hidden affairs is going to be a lot to really swing things, so I'm probably going to get him to charge my halberds and draw out the Unsullied further away. I take a lot of damage on my crossbows, and I play Baratheon Justice to toss out a couple tokens of my own. I'm going to use Shay on the bags to heal up my crossbows after the tokens get tossed out, just because I don't like having anything around 6 wounds when a dragon's around and can easily kill them. On Adam's turn, I'm going to tactical reposition my Rose Knights up more now that Dany's locked in place because she's activated, and he's going to use Threaten onto the crossbows to weaken them. His Unsullied swords are going to charge my halberds. He actually fails the first roll, but he uses Fire and Blood to re-roll it so he can get himself on in there. I did taunt just in case, for whatever reason, the Unsullied swords didn't attack my halberds, but it was a pretty obvious play that was what he was going to go for. He doesn't really care about charging over the corpse pile because he's always getting re-rolls, and he takes a full rank off of me. My activation, I get my Rose Knights on in there on Dany's unit, and I'm able to get a decent amount of damage out even though I'm charged over the corpse pile and lost my rerolls because their saves are garbage without bags. They're saving 5-7. 5-8 because of the corpse pile. However, he plays sudden retreat and hauls ass out of there, being able to get the rerolls to roll a 6 and completely open me up to a dragon. I really thought I was going to be safe fully aligning to the Stormcrow archers and that he would only be able to get one dragon in on me. This misplay is going to cost me a lot. I take a whole 7 wounds off the Rose Knights and I have no way to heal them. Best I can do is Sentinel to get my crossbows a little bit further out and try and save them from getting overrun onto by one of the dragons. With that, I move my riders on my turn, and I go for a risky charge onto the Unsullied. My only hope at this point is to give up on one half of the board and focus on the other, maybe try and claw back some support, claw back some positioning, and get the dragons to move themselves into a position they don't want to be, because I'm hoping I can kill both of his infantry units. I get really lucky and I land the big charge and the riders are on there. They're weakened, but they're hitting on 3s, throwing 9 dice with rerolls now. I'm able to get a ton of damage through. I don't get the panic test on him, but still, Sundering in the flank is going to set these guys saving on 6s, and I get a ton out. Rhaegal's going to go ahead and move up, and sure enough, blast my Rose Knights. I definitely had that coming. I way overextended with my 9-point unit against a bunch of units that don't care about armor. Yikes. Rhaegal's going to surge forth backwards to get into a safer position. I'm going to activate halberds, and sustained assault is going to get big damage on through. I'll admit, I actually got a lot more damage through with this attack off of Renly than I expected, which is probably going to really help me get back into this game because I more or less threw away my 9-point Rose Knights into 2 dragons for no particular reason. The start of round 3, I go first, but Adam's going to use Tycho to heal those 5 wounds back onto those swords, undoing that amazing attack that I was able to get out with the sustained assault. I'm going to activate Marjorie, and I'm going to put her onto swords, which is going to let me heal the halberds up 1. It doesn't change their attack dice rank, but that's fine. I get to put out a vulnerable token and play my other sustained assault to again get rerolls and again deal 5 wounds. That's going to put a lot through, and Adam, wanting to make the most of his activations, is going to attack with the swords. They actually get a ton of damage through, and I crit fail my panic test on the riders, but I final strike and overkill that thing way out of there with all the hits that I pop out. On my activation, I maneuver the riders to set up for the charge, and Adam plays Dragon's Flight, which is going to allow him to reposition Rhaegal to try and capitalize on that and get in on the riders after I charge in and probably kill Daenerys. I get another charge, land it, and he's going to pop Jorah, sacrificing that 1 wound to put out a weakened token and a vulnerable token. So I've got all 3 tokens on myself at this point. The weaken makes a pretty big difference, but I have Ars of the Fury to give myself an extra vicious on top of that. So between the fact that I'm throwing still a pretty considerable amount of dice, 6 on 3s now, even with the weakened token, he's saving on 6s. I've got some tokens out on him. I push through the damage. I reposition the riders to try and get into long range of the Sentinel. And that's it for Daenerys. That's going to help me catch up a little bit. But at this point, I'm still really not feeling too confident. On his activation, he's going to go ahead and put Miri onto the horses, replacing it with token dumping onto my halberds. I'm going to activate Shay, put her onto bags, heal up my riders. Adam's going to Tycho pass. I'm going to activate Shire onto crowns, heal the riders 1 more wound, and zap a dragon to do nothing. Adam plays his D onto letters, weakening my riders to get tokens back on out there. I use my halberds to go back onto the point, and then there's dragon time. The dragons are going to max damage charge, and they're going to get 8 wounds off onto my riders of Highgarden. I'm really glad I was able to get that 1 last heal off with the Shire proc, because that was able to put me up to 9. So my riders survived with 1 wound, which I figured they were probably going to die anyway. There's 2 dragons. At this point, he could double tap whatever he wants, especially knowing that he goes first next round. The most I could possibly hope for with my riders is that they stick around just to tie them up, and maybe, just maybe, I can start pincering in with the crossbows and the halberds. I still have another Hidden Affair in the deck. Maybe I can get the halberds in so I can get in on the rear of a dragon after they charge into my crossbows to try and kill them. I shoot with my crossbows on my turn after I sentinel them into position. I do basically no damage after he plays Fire Made Flesh, and after the panic token, I crit fail my panic test again, and that's it for them. I end up killing my own riders, which is a really, really bad swing, because that frees up that dragon activation I was really hoping to tie up, so he can just get straight in on my crossbows. Even though I've got the Iron Resolve, which is going to help me a lot with the morale test and the tree, it's still a dragon. It does a ton of damage. So even though I pass my panic test, I am blasted out of there. So this game is kind of over at this point. I'm just going to talk out the rest of what it is rather than showing you 2 more rounds of what's just running around in circles. He goes first next round and he kills the dragon with his attack. Rhaegal's going to overrun onto that point and sit there, and then Drogon's going to maneuver march onto that other point. My halberds aren't that fast. They're speed 5, but they don't have a cavalry maneuver. My only chance of winning is to try and kill one of these dragons, and I spend 2 rounds just hauling on ass over to one of these dragons. He loads me up with tokens. I get 1 charge to try and deal 8 wounds. Spoiler alert, it doesn't happen. And then we just kind of exchange heals back at each other until the game ends. Somewhere around, I think it was 10-5? It might have been 10-4. Point is, I got crushed. I walked into the dragons and I played really poorly. I positioned myself awfully. I put my crossbows in a place where they could do absolutely jack diddly. I put my Rose Knights, my heavy armor grind unit, out in front of 2 dragons. Even though I didn't really mean to put them out in front of 2 dragons, it's positioning and placement that I really need to be mindful of, and I need to be mindful of the Targaryen deck and my opponent's deck in general. Sudden Retreat is a really powerful card because I thought my front was fully locked up with his enemy unit and only 1 dragon would be able to get into my flank. Instead, I found myself faced with 2 dragons in the front, and 2 dragons is all you need to kill a unit. Adam played that game very well. I played it very poorly, even though the dice were for the most part in my favor. I really don't have any excuses for that one. So that's going to be the first, I think, rather anticlimactic game of Season 5. Mother of Dragons has definitely pulled out ahead. I always thought that she had some pretty strong plays in her because dragons themselves are pretty good. And although the dragons haven't been changed, a few of her cards have been changed and she just got some additional value on her commander. So I think she's back to a place where she's a really solid second pairing to Drogo. And Renly 2 still sucks. He lost Boisterous Charisma, which is a pretty important card ability, though it really wouldn't have made too much of a difference here, and the only thing he gained is the ability to discard one of his cards. His buff is to get rid of one of his cards and play with 2 cards less in his deck. It's a little sad, but I mean, I guess it's better than what happened to Andrew Estermont. I'm hoping the next report that I put out onto this channel is more exciting. I know I owe 1 community member of the song community, Jor. I think he's currently the Sandstag on the community Discord right now. I've played a few games with a list that he's given me, a Night's Watch list, and I meant to do it as the last video we had of Season 4, but I got knocked down for a couple weeks with COVID, which I'm still recovering from. You guys can't hear it, but I'm coughing throughout that entire match. Adam was kind enough to come on up to my apartment to play with me after I tested negative for 3 days in a row so I wouldn't get him sick. He played a game afterwards against Starks, and that's probably going to be the next video we have on the channel, and I'm really looking forward to putting that out for everyone with you guys. All right, thank you for watching, and take care. See you guys next time.